Welcome to Thursday Thoughts, your weekly dose of real, honest conversation on all things personal growth. These are the chats Lucy and I love having every week over on Instagram. They're unfiltered, unedited, and always rooted in practical tools and a dose of inspiration. Let's dive in. So this morning, we're going to be talking about sleep. This is your suggestion, and actually a very good one for me right now because I don't feel I've been getting enough. So over to you. You start.
Okay. So I think we've done one of these before about sleep, and I've certainly done a mini-sode about it on my podcast. But I think it's like such an important thing to talk about because, you know, we all know that sleep is important, but I'm not sure that we all realise how important it is, and it's something that I've become more aware of over the last couple of years, I guess. I've listened to so many people talking about all the research that shows how incredibly fundamental, like it's basically one of the three pillars, like exercise, diet, sleep. Those are the three things, right? And I think that we're far too casual actually about how much sleep we get. And, you know, I hear people say things like, oh yeah, but I'm one of those people who can get by on for like 5 hours a night. And it's like, no, even if you think you can, actually we all need between 7 and 9 hours a night. And the research really shows that. And when we don't get that, it's actually scary. The health implications of not getting enough sleep. And it's something that I personally battle with, right? Because I get up at 5 or my alarm goes off at 4:59. And then me and my accountability buddy phone each other at 5. And so, you know, I'm awake then. And obviously that means needing to go to bed earlier, which is not always easy, especially if I'm, you know, kind of working late into the evening and I always feel like I need that just decompression time. And especially it can be harder, I think, in the summer when it's light, blah, 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 blah. But I've really been trying for the last few months to prioritize my sleep. And in fact, we were talking about this on a Thrive Solo membership call the other day. And somebody said how I can't remember the context, but they'd said that they'd heard somebody say that we should treat sleep like a job. And we should. And we really, really need to prioritize it. I mean, the research on, for example, shift workers, you know, it's really scary to see the effects on people who have to work nights and have this kind of really weird sleep schedule. And again, the health implications of not getting enough sleep are actually scarier than I think many of us realize. I'm not going to go into them now because I don't, you know, off the top of my head, I don't want to kind of, you know, say anything without having sort of facts and figures in front of me. But there's a guy called Matthew Walker who, Polly, I'm sure you've probably heard of, who he's kind of one of the sleep experts. He's definitely worth checking out because he talks, you know, he is an expert in sleep. But I just think it's something that is worth talking about again, because we all need a reminder of it. Sometimes we can be all be really crap when it comes to sleep and just a bit too casual about it. And one thing that I will say is that I am trying, and it doesn't always work. I am very far from perfect, but I try more and more to go to bed and read an actual physical book, not a Kindle, not on my phone, but an actual book. Because I personally find that when I read before I go to sleep, I sleep so much better and I go to sleep easier. So, because, you know, that's something I'm sure we'll get onto this, but we all know that we should not be looking at our screens up until the second that we go to bed. But I think so many of us do, myself included, very, very often. But yeah, so reading an actual book before I go to sleep is something that I am trying to prioritize. And also, I think the other thing that we forget is that if we need 7 to 9 hours sleep, you know, let's say you want 7 hours sleep, well, let's say 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say I get up at 5, right? And I want 11 hours sleep. That doesn't mean getting into bed at 10 o'clock, because none of us, or few of us, get into bed, turn the light out and go straight to sleep. So really you have to add on, I would say, an extra half an hour in bed in order to get the amount of sleep that you need. But yeah, so I just thought this was an interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's It's a massive topic, isn't it, sleep? Because if you're getting sleep, if you can sleep well, great, brilliant. But so many people I know struggle with sleep. I know so many people at midlife, menopause, perimenopause. It can be really the one thing which is disrupted, and it can be really bloody frustrating because someone says, "Oh, you need lots of sleep," but actually it's like, "Yes, I'm trying, but I'm really struggling with it." So I suppose what we could do, in this chat, we can obviously talk about some of the things which we know are helpful for us to get some sleep. It is so important. I'm just on the back of a really busy weekend. I just feel like I've had a really busy few weeks of just lots and lots of fun things have which have all been great and energizing and wonderful. And I've been seeing friends, and I saw Harry Styles on Friday, which was incredible. But I didn't get back home from Wembley until 2 a.m. And then, of course, I go to bed. And because I'm I'm kind of in the rhythm of getting up at a certain time, I naturally just wake up at that time. So just didn't get enough sleep. And then the next night I was out at a friend's party, didn't go to bed again until late. And, and I still wake up early. I find it really difficult to sleep in. So it kind of all kind of compounds, and then you end up just exhausted because you're not getting enough sleep. And part of me, sometimes obviously you might say no to something, but sometimes life happens and things fall all together, and it's just like boom, 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 boom. Oh God, I'm really not getting enough sleep. Because for me, the most important way for me to get enough sleep is kind of it's a rhythm, it's a routine. It's our bodies, our systems love prediction. They're like, we are prediction machines. They love routine. So our circadian rhythm, which I'm sure most people have heard about, is basically our kind of hormonal cycle for sleep. In terms of in the morning we have huge amounts of cortisol released, which helps us wake up and get up out of bed. And as the day goes on, that cortisol reduces, and our melatonin, our sleep hormone, that starts to increase. And so we have this sort of natural cycle. And it loves it when we get outside first thing in the morning. So we get that light in our eyes. That helps keep the circadian rhythm going. And so if we can get ourselves into a really lovely natural cycle, which we follow most of the time, that really helps us with our sleep, because our bodies just like to know what's next. If our sleep is completely erratic, we're going to bed at different times, waking up at different times, and it's really not helpful. However, the flip side of that is, which is what I find, is because I generally go to bed at a certain time and I wake up at a certain time, when I go to bed later, my body is still like, bing, I wake up at exactly the same time. And I'm like, no, go back to sleep. I need more sleep. But actually, I find that, what I have to do then is go to bed earlier. So I'm an early riser. For me to be able to get my hours in, I have got to go to bed earlier rather than relying on sleeping later. And sleeping later just doesn't work for me. So, for example, last night I went upstairs to my bed at about 20 to 8. 7:30, 28, I was like, right, I'm going to read in bed. And you know what? I fell asleep like that. I was so tired.
How lovely. Oh,
it was so lovely. Having said that, though, I woke up at 11 because at the moment I've got 3 teenagers in the house, and people coming and going, and although I'm like, and so I'm still, my mum alertness is all never not on. So I woke up at about 3 or 4 times in the night because just hearing noises or whatever, which is annoying. But I did go back to sleep. And then I woke up when my alarm went off this morning. So yes, so I feel like that is the way to do it. Is if you're really tired, just take yourself, if you can, off to bed much earlier. Obviously, if you've got young children and you've got to put them to bed first, and that was always a problem for me in the past, because obviously you've got to wait for them to go to bed. But now my kids are older, they can put themselves to bed. So so that's always a really good way to do it. Know yourself, and actually those hours of sleep before midnight, apparently, according to the scientists that show that this is where, they're all important, but the hours before are those, I think that I might be wrong on this, that's when we get this sort of brainwashing, this like flood of water, this flood of fluid goes into the brain, and it almost like washes all away the stuff which builds up over the day.
But then the second part of the sleep is also important because I think that's when I'm not quite, something with brain waves or something goes on. So they are both important, but particularly, we often forget about that early sleep, which is also really important. So yes, I think it's just about routines, habits, rhythm. As I said, our bodies love to know what is next.
Yeah.
And I think if we can get into a rhythm, then it's really helpful rather than being really erratic with our sleep, which, to be honest, I have been really erratic with my sleep recently. So I'm not, but I don't always follow it. And I feel it, but I feel it this morning. I'm a bit, I feel tired. I feel tired. And, I've just got to ride that wave.
I will only ever recommend brands that I know, love and use myself. And one of those is Ancient and Brave. Honestly, they've become part of my daily habits. The very first thing I do every morning is pour myself a big glass of water with their True Hydration in it. It feels like such a simple ritual, but it really sets me up for the day. And I know I'm properly rehydrating with their blend of electrolytes and minerals, especially before I exercise, which I always do in the morning. Then later on, when I make my coffee, I stir in their True Collagen powder into the coffee. Now, it blends in straight away, no fuss, there's no taste, and collagen is something we naturally lose as we age, but it's so important for our skin, joints, and overall vitality. Now, I'll be honest, Ancient and Brave may cost a little more than some of the tubs you'll spot on supermarket shelves, but the difference is you're getting the highest quality ingredients, sourced with integrity and tested to a higher standard, and absolutely no nasties added. That's why I trust them and why I think they're worth every penny. And because I want you to be able to try them out for yourself, I've got a special offer for you. As a listener of this podcast, you can get 20% off your very first order. All you need to do is click the link in the show notes and pop in the code POLLYW20 at checkout. They've got more than just collagen and hydration too. They've got creatine, they've got blends, supplements. So it's a perfect chance to explore their range and make the most of that 20% off.
Yeah. No, I've also, by the way, going back to what you said about the sleep, the hours of sleep that you get before midnight are the most important hours. So if we can, it is actually better to go to bed, let's say 10 o'clock, so you get those couple of hours in before midnight, rather than going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and still having the 7 or 8 hours, but getting up later, blah, 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 blah. I've also heard that, and the research, obviously, is there. And one thing I wanted to say, actually, this weekend, so basically yesterday, I was absolutely exhausted. I just felt my body felt knackered, my brain felt knackered, and I realized it was because on Friday night and Saturday night, I had 2 really late nights. Nothing to do with socializing, both to do with work. So Friday night, I had a late night Thrive solo call for my membership, right? Because I do a late night call once a month, because for people in North America, that sometimes works better. So the call started at 9 and went until 10:30. And then I'm the kind of person that when I've been doing something like that, or when I've been working, I can't then go straight to bed. I need at least an hour for myself to just decompress and have that time. So I ended up having a really late night on Friday, late for me, really late night on Friday night. And then on Saturday, I was on live radio from 11 till midnight. And when you've been on live radio, you come off and you're like, and it's so funny because every time I go on, it's BBC Radio London, and every time I go on that show, I'm absolutely knackered in like the hour leading up to it, thinking, my God, how the fuck am I going to stay awake for this? And then, of course, as soon as you're on live radio, like, oh my God, wide awake. So I did that from 11 till midnight on Saturday night, and because that's how I roll, crazy party life. And then again, because I was wide awake and my brain had been really switched on because of this radio appearance, at midnight when we finished, I was then like totally not ready to go to bed. And then I ended up going to bed stupidly late, probably I mean, at least like 1 or half 1. So I'd had these 2 nights of really like late nights. And I did actually sleep in yesterday. I, like you, tend to wake up early, but I can go back to sleep if I need to. So I think I ended up getting up at about 7:30, 8 yesterday. But still felt completely knackered because of that cumulative effect. And that's the thing I think we've got to focus on. Like, we're not looking for perfection, but we are looking to, as much as we possibly can, stay in that routine. And of course, life happens, and it's totally fine to have the odd late night here and there, no problem. But we want to be getting into that routine more often than we're not. And like you say, it's, you know, our bodies like us going to bed at the same time, and they like us waking up at the same time. And actually, one thing that I've heard is that it's actually better to be really tired for one day. So if you have a late night, it's actually better to still get up early, or still not early necessarily, but get up whenever you would normally get up, right? So if you've had a late night, let's say you get up at 5, rather than getting up at 9, it's better to still get up at 5 if you can, and then just go to bed early the following night. Because, and that's not, you know, that's not always easy. I didn't do that yesterday morning. I didn't get up at 5. I let myself have a couple of hours extra sleep, but it is actually supposedly better to get up at the same time every day. I've heard multiple people say that, so I think it's really worth bearing in mind. But again, you know, we're not looking for perfection. It's not always easy. Life happens, and it's totally fine to, you know, have the odd late night. But if we're constantly getting, you know, only 5 or 6 hours a night instead of 7 or 8 hours a night, it is just not going to make us feel good. Even if we think we're fine with that, actually, none of us are. We can function potentially, but we're not going to be at our best. And I was just distracted because this watch thing that I've got is doing some weird buzzing thing, and it was completely distracted. I don't know what's going on. It's just alert. I don't know what it's doing. Anyway, so yes, it is. Yeah, it's really important. I mean, maybe we can talk about some ways that you can, you know, improve your sleep. I mean, meditation is one of the classic things that enables you to sleep better. If you consistently meditate, the likelihood is that you're also going to sleep better. So is it worth touching on those things, Polly, that actually help us get better sleep?
Yeah, because I think, you know, I think people have 2 issues with sleep. It's either getting to sleep, or it's, you know, or you get to sleep, but then you wake up and then in the middle of the night, and then you can't get back to sleep because your brain is so busy. So, you know, a lot of that is because perhaps your nervous system is on high alert. You know, I do think if you've got kids, you hear everything. You know, I've never slept as well as I used to, just because you just run high alert. It's just the way you're programmed. So you know, if you meditate, that's good. You can obviously breathe. Breath work is brilliant for helping, again, down-regulate your nervous system. So if I'm struggling, you know, I fortunately very rarely struggle to go to sleep. For me, it's more I might wake up in the night and then it's getting back to sleep. But you can actually use your breath to really help down-regulate, simply elongating the exhale. So just gentle breaths, elongating the exhale, really helps to shift you into your parasympathetic side of your nervous system. There is actually a breath which has had loads of research. Oh gosh, I can't remember what the guy is who found this now. Anyway, there's a man who did this research, and it's a 4-7-8 breath. I personally have never found this helpful, which is why I never really talk about it much. But the idea is that you breathe in for 4, you hold your breath for 7, and then you sort of quite forcefully sort of release and exhale it for 8. And that has been proven to really help with sleep. For me, if I hold my breath before I go to bed, it kind of gets me it kind of wakes me up rather than sends me off to sleep. So I personally would prefer a really gentle, slow breath, which is just long exhales, and it does relax you. Or just, you know, sometimes just listening to something really on a level can, you know, very gentle, can help send you off to sleep. Reading, for me, I mean, I always try and read as well before I go to bed. Generally, I'll have about 2 sentences, and then I'm like, I'm gone. But I do think reading is a great way of properly allowing your system to down-regulate. Yeah, not looking at screens. I do notice if I look at my phone before bed, it takes me longer to go to sleep. So I really think, we all know that now. It's like, and as tempting as it might be to look at your phone, it does interfere. It's the blue light from that screen. It interferes with your brain and the ability to sleep. So it really, it is, you just try not to look at your phone. You can wear blue blocking glasses, but there's so many. I did an episode with this on my podcast, with this incredible light doctor who basically who discovered the circadian rhythm part in your brain. It was so fascinating.
Wow.
And he talks a lot about the different lights which come into our eyes. And actually, a lot of the blue blocking glasses, he says, are absolutely useless. So you've really got to be careful that you get the right type of blue blocking glasses. And actually, if they're orangey, if they're sort of an orangey then glow on the lens, then they're better. But he really was a bit like, it is so important. It's not just the light from your screen, but it's also the lights in your house. If you've got go in the evening lights which are really bright, that is not going to help your system to know that it's time for sleep. We need to think about, how did our ancestors live, because that is how we've evolved for sleep. So, when the sun went down, there would be candles or there'd be fire. So it's almost like just bring all the levels of your lights down really low, so to prepare you for that sleep. And then obviously in the morning, the advice is to try and get some of that morning daylight, not through a window, but actually just out in the light. It doesn't have to be sunlight, it's just daylight. So even if it's a gloomy, cloudy day, get that light into your eyes for about 10 minutes, because that is going to help with that circadian rhythm and set it. So it's like daylight in the day and sort of dim, glowy light at night is really important, because that, I think, is probably the most important thing, is just to get your circadian rhythm working for you, rather than against you, because that's going to disrupt it straight away.
Like you say, if it's like, for example, when I went out for a walk this morning, it was, it's a beautiful sunny day. So in that case, if you don't have much time, actually, when it's sunny, 5 minutes is enough, apparently. But like you say, when it's cloudy or overcast, or if it's rainy, then it needs more like 10 or 20 minutes. And one other thing that I wanted to add, that I've been doing this for a while now, a lot of people say that you should try not to eat 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. I now have my supper so much earlier than I used to. I'm like a child. I have supper at like 6:30. And I used to eat supper like much later, sort of more like, 7:30, 8. One of the perks of being single is that I can eat exactly when I want, what I want. And so I always try and finish eating by 6:30. 7 at the latest, because I like to have those few hours, because apart from anything else, it just makes it, your body doesn't want to have to be digesting food when you get into bed, because essentially it's still working when it should be resting. But if you've just eaten before you go to bed, your body continues to work to digest that food. And I know some people find this really hard, because there's a lot of late night snackers out there, which I completely relate to. But I've kind of trained myself now, actually. So I don't do that. And I used to do it all the time, like, I'll just have a mouthful of this or whatever it might be, kind of late in the evening. I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with. But if you can possibly not do that, that's a really, really good thing. Just set, and I've made it a non-negotiable now. And of course, it's not every single night. Like, last weekend I had friends over, and we were eating late, and I had my sister over, and we were eating late, and blah 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 blah. You can't do it all the time, but as much as you can, if you can stop eating 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, that's a really good thing. And that's also going to help you sleep better. And I find that if I'm sure there's lots of people thinking, I can't do that because I always have to have my late night piece of chocolate or my whatever. And I completely get it. But what I do is I have my little I have a chocolatey snack every evening. I have like chocolate covered almonds, because I am such a chocolate person. I have to have some little sweet chocolate treat after my supper every day. So I have just a few chocolate covered almonds, and then that's it. And I do not allow myself to eat anything after that. And you know, it can be difficult initially, but then you do get used to it. You can always have like, you know, are you drinking enough water? We often think we're hungry when actually we just need more water. And, you know, you can have a cup of tea or you know, whatever it is, instead of having that late night snack. But I think that is going to make a big difference to how you sleep. Killing two birds with one stone.
Absolutely. And also it gives, you know, I mean, once I've eaten in the evening, that is always it for me, because it's really it's really good to give your digestion a break. And, you know, if you can have at least a 12-hour fast overnight, that is going to really, really help you sleep better, feel better the next day. I totally do that as well. And you just, I try not to have chocolate in our house because otherwise I eat it all. But, you know, again, I just think with all of this stuff, it's like with anything, it's like the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, if we can do things in the way that we know are helpful. And of course, 20% of the time, there's going to be times where you don't stick to it, and that's okay. But I think if we can get into a general pattern which supports us, then, you know, I certainly have not been great at all the way I've been living the last couple of weeks, because it's been so, and also the heat, you know, the weather, gosh, you know, the heat, you know, no one was sleeping well. I don't think anyone slept well last week because it was so hot. So it's just recognizing that and going, okay, right, I need to obviously maybe get a few more hours in. One thing I did want to talk about was I used to, before I had injured my knee, wear a Whoop band, which is one of these wearable devices which tracks your data. I still haven't put it on yet, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to put it back on or not.
Apparently they're not very reliable.
Yeah, well, I think they are. You can compare your data to, you know, they're all different. They all measure. They all have their own algorithms of how they measure. So obviously, if you're comparing it, if you wear a device, you can compare with your data, with only your data. But I don't think you should compare it with anybody else, whatever, because that algorithm is quite specific to that particular device. And in terms of the sleep, I don't know how reliable it is, but you can obviously see patterns with your sleep. However, I used to, you know, be quite obsessed by looking at the number of hours of sleep I'd get, how much deep sleep I'd get, how much REM sleep I would get, both of which are important. And I would sometimes, you know, if I woke up and I saw that I'd had a really, really good night's sleep on my data, but I felt like I'd had a really bad night's sleep, I would go, oh, it's amazing psychologically. I'd go, okay, well, I'll be fine. However, it works totally the opposite way around as well. So if I felt like I'd had a good night's sleep and the data was saying, you've had only a few, you know, it's not been good at all. Again, that can influence how you feel, which is why I think we have to constantly remind ourselves that the most important way to kind of understand how you're feeling is to actually tune in to yourself and trust you rather than trusting the data. And I think this is becoming more of a thing because more and more people are getting quite obsessive about wearing the wearables and tracking their data in terms of sleep. So I think, you know, we just need, I do it. I've done it and I might do it again. I don't know. I haven't decided. But I think we have to, first and foremost, tune in to ourselves, our bodies, and feel how we feel in this moment. And sometimes actually you might feel like you've had a really bad sleep, but actually you might be okay. And it's, you know, it's listening to yourself, listening, you know, it's that whole listening to your intuition. We have so much wisdom within us that so many of us are tuned out of and we don't trust. So trust yourself. If you're tired, then you know, go to bed a little bit earlier the following night, rather than trusting your data with your life.
Yeah. Totally. And it's the same also with like working out and tiredness. basically, if I'm feeling really tired, if my body is feeling really tired, I won't push myself. Like, for example, I might get on my rebounder and just kind of gently bounce rather than do jumping jacks or running on the spot or whatever it is, because I always think if my body is feeling really tired, I just am much more. I'm really mindful of that, and I don't force myself if I can tell that it just needs a bit of a break. And in fact, this morning, for some reason, I did a strength workout, and I was really struggling to do these like just arm lifts with weights, and I could feel that for some reason I was just finding it harder than usual, and actually, we're going off a slight tangent, but I always say to myself, when we're never looking for perfection. Consistency always beats perfection every fucking time, whether it's sleep or exercise or meditation or anything else. So, just remember that. Just stay as consistent as you can. Don't try and be perfect.
Yeah, and take the pressure off yourself. If you are struggling with sleep, the worst thing we can do, and it's easier said than done, is to worry about it, is to fret about it. Take the pressure off yourself. You will sleep eventually, but the more, if we worry, then it's going to feed into that worry, and then we're going to get caught in feeling anxious about it, which is going to send off those chemicals in the body, which is going to make us more anxious, make it harder. So it's just like, some nights we're going to get more sleep than other nights. And your body, you just get it. I think, it's consistency, it's rhythm, it's routine. I really do believe that, and setting your conditions up, obviously the best possible way, dark room, no screens, nice, cool, nice sheets, make your, we have no TV in our bedroom. I've, never ever have had a TV in our bedroom. I know lots of people say they can't go to sleep without the TV.
I don't have I've never had TV in the bedroom.
No screens in the bedroom. No. And we have I always, whatever the weather, the windows wide open. So I get, lots of fresh air in. And for me, that is, that helps me to go to sleep. I cannot sleep in a stuffy, hot room at all. So yeah. Right, Lucy, it's 9:01.
1 minute
We've got a message here on set. I find socialising exhausting the next day, so I go for a nap in the afternoon. Yeah, I think, having a nap is, I know people who can literally go and have 4 minutes and they say they feel like a new person. I'm so jealous of them.
Same.
Because if you can nap, I think it helps. Go for it. Yeah. I personally struggle. I've never been able to nap. I did another podcast episode I did with someone else about sleep, did say, if you are struggling with sleep, try, and you really do need a nap, have it, but try not to, because actually you're building up your kind of, that capacity to go to sleep. It's adenosine. You have this adenosine which builds up in your body, which is basically what helps you to go to sleep. And if you have a little nap, that's going to kind of take the edge off a little bit. So I'm not an expert. I have spoken to experts about sleep. So come and have a listen to some of my podcast episodes if you want to find out more. But it's not all. It doesn't all stay in my head.
I hear you.
All right. Right. Well, I think we've covered it. Anything else? I think that's everything.
No, I think we're done, baby.
Perfect.
We'll be back next week.
Yeah, well, I'm actually away next week.
Oh, okay.
I need to have. We need to have.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Yeah. Okay.
All right then.
All right.
Speak to you later.
Okay.
Lots of love.
Bye.
Bye.